volunteers bump up, they'll, hey, it's all of grace, man. It's not about works. And I say, yeah, you're right. Does that mean you don't exert effort? No. See, the idea that we have to understand grace. We've gotten, we talk about hidden in plain sight. Grace is a word too that we've kind of gotten half the meaning. Grace is so much more robust than we could ever imagine. And we need to talk about that, but we got to talk about character. I want to kind of close out my afternoon session. It's kind of my day. I want to talk about how pastors should need to order their time. We have a unique vocation, and I remember I came in from industry. I was an engineer, and then I was a teacher, and my world was very clear, very ordered, how I worked and what I did. And then all of a sudden, I was pastoring in Chicago, urban Chicago, downtown. I walked into my new office then in this little tiny church of it was about 600 or 700. And I closed the door and I was in my office and I go, well, what do I do here? What am I supposed to do? I was at a loss. It was very different. I had a lot of choices myself. We need to figure out, how do we order our life? And ministry is a complicated deal. Would you agree? So we'll talk about that at the end here. But I'll start out with the idea of character. Character. What is character? 2 Corinthians 5. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Okay? We're different. As followers of Jesus, we become like little Christ. We're different. A new character of Jesus, not an elimination of your character, but a change of our character into Christ's character. Therefore, if anyone's in Christ, he's a new creation. The old is gone, the new is come. Now, I hear that verse all the time quoted when in a conversion type of way. Now, we need to understand this verse. That doesn't mean the old is gone. You don't have to worry about your old self. It's all about your new self. That's not what this verse is saying. It's saying the old is gone. That's right. The new life has come in, but we are new, new in conception, not in completion. This verse is talking about that. We are new in conception, not in completion. Don't get the idea that because now I'm in Christ, I'm all complete, nothing more to do. I'm all done. I've heard many churches teach that kind of thing. Have any of you heard that? And then when people are really trying to partner with Jesus, people are very leery of works. This is a complicated theological conundrum we have put before the congregations. Grace versus works. And I want to say again that character is a very important thing. And I said this yesterday, that there was a time in our culture in the early 20th century where character was part and parcel with education in our country. And in England, the Western world, there would be departments of character formation and character education. One of the people in England that was big in this, who's written some books, was a guy. Now, this is actually his name, Samuel Smiles. It's true. But listen to what he says. He talks about, in this little paragraph, the power of good character. And he says this: good character is human nature in its best form. It is moral order embodied in the individual. It is the crown and glory of one's life. Good character is the noblest possession of a person. Lofty. This is big. Constituting a rank in itself and an estate in the general goodwill. Dignifying every station or vocation that you have, exalting every position in society. Good character exercises greater power than wealth and secures all honor without jealousies of fame. That character is power is true in a much higher sense than knowledge is power. Mind without heart, intelligence without conduct, cleverness without goodness are powers in their way, but they may be powers only for mischief. I want to read that one again. This is awesome. That character is power is true in a much higher sense than knowledge is power. Mind without heart, intelligence without conduct, cleverness without goodness are powers in their way, but they may be powers only for mischief. Therefore, pursue truthfulness, pursue integrity, pursue goodness, qualities that don't depend on a person's words, but form the essence of good character. That's a mouthful, and that's a good writer right there. But character is what Jesus is forming in us. That's what he wants of his character within us. And that's why we have to wrestle with, how is this done? But what is it though? Now, so what is character? What are the kind of in the, if you're in the business world, you have all these little plaques with little definitions of things. And I always see, I've been in offices of people and I see the one character up there. What do they say? What's the common thing that people use for character in business? Character is integrity. Yes. Yeah. A person of integrity. And when we say that, they're integrated, there's continuity. People that have great character, there's something comfortable in who they are, their skin, they're comfortable in that. But there's a saying that is a popular saying about character out there. There you go, bro. Yeah. Character is who you are when nobody's looking. Okay. I like that. That's a good one as well. But that doesn't just happen. And just because you start to follow Jesus and you know scripture and all that doesn't mean you have integrity or good character. Do you know that? We've seen enough of it in the church to know that there's no guarantee in that. And that's partly because people don't know how to cultivate that. And that's why formation is a conversation that must be had. So what I want to say is character. Dallas Willard uses a 2-word definition of character. And he says this character is habituated will. Habituated will. I'll unpack that. Hang on. Okay. Habituated will. You and I have no idea how habituated we are. Human nature is not that complicated. People who study human dynamics and everything see patterns that are so persistent. We are so habituated. And so character is habituated will. You and I don't even know what the highways are here. I'm going to give an example. This is how habituation works and how character works. When I'm in LA, the freeways, we're pretty bad in LA. And right out front from where I work is the 210 freeway. And literally I have a 20-minute drive on that freeway every day. And man, oh man, we have got road rage going in the morning when I'm headed on in. And now driving tends to bring up for all of us our habituated will. Do you realize that? Your habituated will shows up when that road rager comes flying on by you on the freeway. And when they go by, your habituated will goes into operation. And since many of you are more godly than I, you say, Lord, bless that person. Maybe there's an emergency. But there's others of us in this room probably roll down our window and give the one-way sign. Some people do that. That's habituated will. That's our character is formed through habits, and we go on automatic response. This is why how many of you remember WWJD? Okay. Well, what is that? What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? That's a great, there's a great intention in that movement. You have your bracelet, WWJD. The only problem with WWJD, it's too late. Because usually in the moment that you really want to be WWJD, what would Jesus do? You're already acting. Your actions are already going because of our habituation. Your character shows up before you're able to say, well, should I act like Jesus? We get to see it. Either we're blessing, either it comes out. Oh, it's now we're back to aroma and radiance, aren't we? Yeah. Because we're always radiating something. Our character's always radiating. It's true. So Willard says that's what character is. It's habituated will that shows up, and it is formed through a process. There are activities. It does not just get imputed to us. It begins. It is in infancy. When we follow Jesus and regeneration occurs, the birth occurs, and we are now in a different person. I remember the summer of 72, when I decided to follow Jesus, that summer, I became different. Absolutely. I knew it, but it was in infancy. This passage again in Corinthians is about in conception, not in completion. We are being formed through the rest of our life. And this is the formation process. For character is formed through time, experience, frequency, and decision making. So therefore, we need to participate in our character formation. These things help you understand that's how it's going to be formed. Through these avenues. It's not immediate and it's not imputed. We get to partner. We're back to synergy here. Paul became radically different. His character, he took on the character of Christ. Now remember, when he came to Christ in his miraculous Damascus experience, he went away to the desert for 3 years and Jesus personally discipled him and then reemerged. He became a different man. I don't believe the week after that being knocked off his horse, he probably had a nice, better love for a Gentile. I think that took some time. Took a lot of discussions with Jesus about how that was going to work. You think so? I think so too. So this is really important, and I want to kind of drive this home for us to understand this process of character formation. And I'm going to read you something from a wonderful little book by Greg Boyd called Letters from a Skeptic. Have any of you read that book? Any of you know that? Yeah. It's a wonderful little book. It's probably 99 cents on Kindle. You can get it. But these are letters from Greg Boyd, a pastor and theologian, and his atheist father. And it's back and forth kind of discussions they're having. It's a really, really great little book. And Boyd is really smart here. And he's talking to his dad about faith because his dad was tough. So I'm going to read this exchange here. And this is Greg Boyd to his dad. He's saying, Dad, as I wrote to you in some earlier correspondence, I believe love requires freedom. It must be chosen. And the greater the possibility of love, the greater the possibility of evil. I think we agree on this in some previous letters. But I don't think this implies that love must forever be a tenuous affair. And now he's going to go in. You see, Dad, I think that we tend to become the decisions we make. The more we choose something, the more we become that something. We are all in the process of solidifying our identities by the decisions that we make. With each decision we make, we pick up momentum in the direction of that decision. Just observing people, I think, can prove this point. I knew an old lady once who was the most ugly, bitter, mean-spirited person I'd ever met. Yet, as a young lady, however, I was told that she was beautiful, personable, and fun. But at the age of 19, her fiancé ran off with her sister 3 days before her wedding date. She was understandably humiliated and deeply hurt. But what is most tragic is that she proceeded to choose to be hateful and unforgiving toward her sister and ex-fiancé for the rest of her life. Though her sister was extremely sorry for what she had done and tried numerous times to make amends later on, literally over the course of 50 years, this lady would never budge. And with each decision against love and forgiveness, she solidified herself in bitterness. Like every negative demotion that we entertain over a long period of time, her bitterness eventually colored her whole outlook on life. She became her hatred. She became her bitterness. The momentum of her decisions became irreversible. She no longer could choose it. She couldn't now choose otherwise. All the good God intended for her to be was consumed by the repeated course of hate that she chose. What started as her decision eventually became her nature. So it is, I believe, in every area of our lives. The more we choose something, the harder it is to choose otherwise, until we finally are solidified or eternalized in our decisions. The momentum of our character becomes unstoppable. We create our character with our decisions, and our character in turn exercises more and more influence on the decisions we make. It's in the nature of free created beings, and I don't see how it could be otherwise. Life, I guess, is a lot like the proverbial snowball rolling down the hill. So it is, Dad. All creatures which God creates share a love, a period in which they must choose love and to not love. Once chosen, for whatever period of time that is necessary, they become solidified. This is an eternalization that makes one's character fit for heaven or for hell. This is what we're talking about. I love that he talks so clearly about the itemization of how this process happens. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Yes. And how many young parents? Your young parents? Yeah. And we take it seriously. There's far more motivation when kids come in the view. Boy, I want to be a good parent. I didn't have good parenting, right? I want to be a good parent. And then those of us that are at my age now, we realize how much we still have of our parents in us and the parenting that we've done. But this is such a truism about how character is imparted. We have it in us. We get to participate in those changes. But the biggest thing is Jesus works with us. This is the freedom that Jesus brings to our character. We may have grown up with a lot of bad stuff in our life. We come to Jesus and Jesus says, all right, hey, we can get there together. But we get to partner synergistically together in this process through spiritual practices, through being with fellowship. I mean, all the avenues. So that's right. Because why? He had a body. The fact that Jesus had a body changed the whole equation. And that's a great verse about suffering. And I guess I should say this. When you study, I said human nature has themes that are pretty obvious. People that study how people change. Um, there's only they say this. There's only two reasons why people change. Only two reasons. And you know what? If what I'm going to tell you is true, then Jesus knew that, don't you think? Yeah. And what you see in the Gospels then, how he interacts with people, he's operating with those two things. Let me just say what those are. Here, the first reason why a person will change. You can write this down. We're going to get a couple of these, how people change. Phil's going to talk about that through Dallas Willard's paradigm of Vim. Do any of you know that when I say that, does it resonate to you? Some of it, no. We'll get to that tomorrow. Vim, and then another thing, the triangle of spiritual transformation. But this is a truism about change. Number one, people will not change or seek transformation or change unless, number one, the level of dissatisfaction, discomfort, or pain of their current condition propels them to change. This is a big principle in 12-step, that one right there. People that suffer with addiction realize that people have to hit bottom before they're going to change. Usually it can be very murky. And the key is, if you're really practicing that, you don't rescue. You stand with people, but you don't rescue. You let the bottom hit, because that's where they have to discover, I've got to make the change. I think about your story. I mean, you talked about suicidal, man, big. I mean, that doesn't get any bigger than that. But there was a clarion thing that occurred in that moment, at that point, and maybe you wouldn't have heard things. Does this resonate with you with that? Because that is one way that sometimes that's what people need. The dissatisfaction, discomfort, or pain of the current state they're in, they cannot stay there anymore. And they change. They'll move in some direction. But that's not the only option. There's one other way people change. And it's this: a new, compelling vision for a different reality of life propels a person to change. A new, compelling vision for a different reality of life propels people to seek change. And some of those two things could kind of merge together. Sometimes in that dissatisfaction, the pain you're going through, all of a sudden you're now able to get a different vision. You're now more open to a new vision of a different reality. True? That can be there as well. Now, do you realize, just in that little story, though, just Jesus coming up to the woman at the well was disruptive. Being a male Jew coming up to a woman in the heat of the day would have been an absolutely horrific thing. And then the story continues. That's just the beginning of that. But Jesus knew that disruption, I would say, transformation always begins in the form of interruption and disruption. I think that that's true. So the more we are seeking to have no issues and equilibrium in every way, we are limiting our ability for change. We need we need those realities. We need visions and we need disruptions. And and to be honest with you, when people think about their most transformative moments, what usually rises to the top, probably 7 out of 10 times, is the thing that really changed them was pain. Pain. So so there's a whole strategy we need to talk about with pain if you're a pastor, because we think our job is to relieve people of pain. And we're gonna see people in pain all the time. And I'm not saying we don't do it, but there's a way to relieve pain without without trying to remove them from what's going on, because they gotta go through these things with somebody's got a hold of them to help them work it out. To me, this has helped me as a pastor. Now, I mean, really big because of the counseling load that I had, and I realized, hey, that's my job is not to relieve them. I want to listen and pray, and my job is to stand with people in their pain, in their disillusionment, discomfort, until the breakthrough comes. Breakthrough, isn't that a name? Oh, that sounds like your church. Yeah. Yeah, but that's yes. This is really important. And here's the last point on this here. When you look at Jesus in the Gospels, this was my observation when I looked at the ones that Jesus preached or at least pushed and caused more pain were who? Huh? We're now back to the Pharisees here. Okay. I noticed and I don't know if there's a correlation. I'm not saying I've got this right, but I wonder if the more religiously we are committed to living in denial about things in our real life, the number one option tends to be where God works. I've just seen it over and over again. People in church that, a cancer diagnosis, a wayward child, a painful hospital experience. Sometimes those are I'll put it this way. I wish that the compelling vision was the shining star to every renewal, but it's not. It's just not. And sometimes it is the most disruptive, the dissatisfaction and pain. So I want you to just think about that. That's something that we, as pastors, we're going to deal with till the end of our careers. This issue of how change occurs and how do we partner in God's redemptive move in their lives. Make sense? Okay, you're going to hear some more opportunities tomorrow with Phil. He'll share a little bit more. Vim is a great model about transformation as well. So we'll talk about that. Um, Let me say something about grace. I put this at the back end because I really want you to see that grace. Oh, yes, sir. My Chick-fil-A man. Yes, brother. Yeah, I think sometimes, uh, m- you know, our religion can be a cover, can't it? Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to. I'm speaking in house. I'm speaking to the in house folks here. All of us. We know that many people uh, are far from God, but they cover it with God talk. And many of those people, the way that God can break through is oftentimes break that down, and it's pain. He doesn't cause it, but that pattern pushes people to bring some pain and dissatisfaction. And those are the points that I have seen over and over again that God breaks in on. I just It's an observation. I'm not saying that's the way it is. I do see these two ways that people change. I do. Yes. Yeah. Sure. Just don't put my name. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, that's all right. That's good. Okay, now let me shift here to do you want to say anything, Phil? You look like you're about ready to say something, but no. All right. You're waiting for tomorrow, I know. All right, let's talk about grace, okay? Because I do think that grace is a very misunderstood word. When you hear grace, you look at we all went to Sunday school. What are the little things we do in Sunday school to teach kid what grace is? Come on. Yeah, listen to the acrostic. The acrostic. Now listen to what we say. The acrostic defines grace for kids. God's riches at Christ's expense. What is that telling you about grace? What is grace about? Huh? Yeah, sin and salvation. It's about atonement. Grace is the hey, grace is helpful. You bet it is. Grace with our sin, in while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So we see that. What's another little definition of grace? Come on, this is if you went to seminary or even Bible school. Unmerited favor. There we go. That's another one. And what is that about? We're back to the same thing, just said a little differently. We're back to atonement again. But I guess what I want to say, and this is, um, I think, really, really important. And Willard believes this because I've been in the spiritual formation movement for 3 decades, 4 decades now. And the biggest complaint I hear about my movement that I'm in is that, oh, that's that works righteousness teachings, works righteousness. And I say, oh gosh, no, no, no. Grace is all over this thing. It's all over it. And I want you to see how in just a moment here, because I think this definition of grace will help us. But I'm going to do this through Titus, one of the best one-page epistles you can read. You guys, look at that. I got Titus open right here. I got the whole thing. I don't even have to turn a page. I love Titus. I love Titus. Titus had a tough job helping put together the church in Crete, an island of barbaric people. Even they call it that. But it's very interesting that in this little tiny epistle, it uses a phrase 7 times in just 3 short chapters. What is it, brother? Good. Man, Rob, you probably got an A in seminary. Man, you got these down. Look at it. He says this time, do what is good. See, the whole idea of really being a disciple, I said it yesterday, is that the real reality of if we're really living this out is we become people who naturally do good. Who naturally do good. See, the church should be people that are doing good in their communities. In fact, if you look at the word church in the Greek, it's ekklesia. You know what that means? Ekklesia means assembly, assembled together, assembled together. And Jesus said, you will be my assembled people together. I've called you out and you are my assembly. Now, Jesus didn't just make up that word when he said it. It was a resident word in the culture. Ecclesias were in every town in the Roman world. Little towns, big towns. Now, this is what an ecclesia was. An ecclesia was a group of maybe 5 to 10 people in a town, a variety of vocations, male, female, people within. They were not elected officials. They were people that were considered to be aware and caring about others. And the ecclesia came together in that town, and their job was to figure out, what can we do that is good for my town? Take that in for a minute. So Jesus says, you're going to be my followers, my disciples, and my disciples are going to be my ecclesia. What if the best definition we could use is that definition that Jesus said? What if all of these tables are different churches, ecclesia? You're called to do good. This is the church that's going to do good for the place that you're in your locale. You're going to do it in your locale. You're going to do it in your locale. That's how we represent Christ, and it's to do good. So here we are now in Titus, and it's all about go to Crete, a rough ministry, not a good place, place to be. And he says, your job is to get it in order, help make disciples, and become people that do good. But here's what he says when he's talking to them about how's that going to happen. He says in verse 11 of chapter 2, after he's instructed each age group, men, women, he says this: for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all humans. The grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all humans. Is that true? Yes. Salvation in this context, think of the word delivered. You've been rescued. God's grace has rescued us. You count yourself rescued? I do. He's rescued me. I don't want to ever go back. He's rescued me. But that's by grace. His grace has rescued me. But then he says this. He goes on, and he's not just staying on the idea of grace and salvation. He goes on and says this: it teaches us. First sentence he said, for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all humanity. It teaches us. What's it? Grace. Grace teaches us. The grace that went after us in our salvation now becomes the grace that teaches us. The power of grace is that God teaches us through grace and in grace. So look at it where he goes. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and live self-controlled and upright and godly lives when I die. No, he didn't say that. He said, in this present age. Let me say that again. Grace teaches, the grace that saved us now is the grace that teaches us to say no. This is now about holiness. The grace that saves you is the same grace that teaches you to become a holy person. We have to live off of grace to become a holy person. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age, right now, while we wait for the blessed hope, the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself, now here he's putting it together again, who gave himself for us to redeem us, the grace that saves us, redeem us from all wickedness, and then, second part, to purify us. That's the other side of grace. So grace has two sides of a coin. On the one side, it is salvific in the sense that it saves us and rescues us. But on the other side of that coin, it's the one that teaches us to become different kind of people. In other words, you and it's not enough to say, I need God's grace when I mess up. That's what we look at grace as a pass, don't we? When somebody does something wrong to us, they say, hey, cut me some grace, right? What are they saying? Just I messed up, and we see it in that category. The church has deformed grace to one side of a coin. And I want to say to you that in this movement of formation, we are not going to make it by will alone or just training alone. I need the grace of God. from the moment I wake up to get through the day. You do too. We need the grace of God to purify us for himself. I love this phrase. He says, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his very own, eager to do what is good. See, that's what this holy life produces. A person that naturally will do good. That's a great way to live. That's how we're going to make a difference in the next decades ahead. That's what we have to do. We're not going to convince them by argumentation. It better be by our goodness that we win people over. Would you agree with that? That's where we have to go. My brothers and sisters, my pastor friends. So this is really important. Willard says, this movement is all about the grace of God. And he says this statement that I want you to think about this. He says, the saint burns more grace than the sinner. Take that in here now. Why would he say that? Why does the saint burn more grace than the sinner? What do you think? That may be confusing for some of you. But if you believe that it's grace that is the thing that makes us holy, you realize that I need grace to become holy. So I'm clinging to grace from when I wake up in the morning till I go down at night. That we burn. He says the saint burns grace like a 747 on liftoff. That's what he says here. And then here's another thought. We would still need grace even if we had never sinned. We would still need grace. See, it's because sin is not just about our sin. I mean, grace is not just about our sin. It's about our becoming. We would still need a life of God. So what is it? What is the definition of grace from this standpoint? Here it is. I'm going to read it. Write this down if you could, and I'll write it up on the board. Grace is God's action or activity in my life. Grace is God's action or activity in my life, accomplishing what I cannot do on my own. Grace is God's action or activity in my life, accomplishing what I cannot do on my own. Hey, I need God's activity every moment. So grace is something we plead. Lord, I need your grace today. I don't know what's facing me today, but I need your grace. I'm gonna be synergistic. I'm gonna walk with you, but I know that it's not all on me. It's not all on you, but I'm trusting that your action is for me today in this process. And it doesn't mean I'm absolving myself. We can't swing the pendulum from passivity to hyperactivity. There's this beautiful ground that we have with God, just like we have in real relationships of love with others, a mutual synergistic dynamic. And that's what we have in this relationship here. Grace is God's action or an activity in my life, accomplishing what I cannot do on my own. Got it? Try that as a new definition of grace, not just unmerited favor. Turn the coin over. All right. Now this is a little map here of that might help you see a little bit more way to look at grace. We have quadrants, 4 quadrants here. And if we think of this quadrant being the quadrant of no effort, but this means no effort means I'm passive. right? I'm not exerting effort. See, grace is not opposed to effort, but to earning. That's a great phrase you need to have, because we do exert effort in this synergistic relationship, but I'm not doing it out of a desire to earn from God. My efforts are not about earning. That's a whole different ballgame. So this would be no effort, but then God's action in my life. What does that produce? There's God's grace going my way, but I am not participating. In this quadrant, that would make you unfruitful. Unfruitful and unproductive. At the end of this, you can take a picture of it. It might be even better if you do it that way, except you can't read my writing. So let's go down to this one. Now in this quadrant, I don't know which, take a look. No effort. Now I'm not exerting any effort. I'm passive in my life with God. And my attitude is one that I'm earning. Man, that's a tough one. That right there will produce hiding or shaming. I feel I'll always be in the midst of shame when I'm not doing anything on my end. And then when I do something, I'm trying to earn God's favor. Does that make sense? Hiding, shaming on this one here. Now, this one is earning. I have an attitude of earning, and I am acting. And what happens in this quadrant is that if you're exerting effort and yet you're trying to do it for earning, this turns into legalism or performing. It makes sense? All right. And lastly, this is what we're hoping for. God's action in my life. I'm receiving that. I'm trusting in God's action, and I am now exerting my effort. This is fruitful and productive. Fruitful and productive. That's just another way to see the bigger picture of this. But grace is really, really important, folks. Man, God's grace is always for us. Always for us. All right. I want to say something here as we get near the end. And I want you to ponder this one because we have a call, and this is from Matthew 10. Hang on. Let me get there. The pages are thin. Okay. This is kind of a closing scripture here for us. In Matthew 10, I talked a little bit about that. Jesus sends the disciples out 2 by 2. This was an apprentice test, an absolute apprentice test. They had been watching Jesus from the moment he called them. They knew that he, without a doubt, was their rabbi. They knew he was special. They came to learn over time that he was the Lord. He was the Savior. In all actuality, Jesus is king over everything, rules over all. And they were learning to get that. So he asked them to do 2 things. He said, I'm going to send you out 2 by 2, and I want you to proclaim the good news as you saw me do it. And boy, they had a lot of opportunities to watching their rabbi proclaim the good news of the kingdom to the common people that they were around. But he also asked them to do the works that Jesus was doing. Manifestation. You see, the ministry of Jesus is threefold. It's proclaiming the good news, it's manifesting the good news, and it's teaching about the good news. Jesus asked them to do two of the three. He asked them to proclaim the good news, manifest. They didn't fully get the teaching about the kingdom, but they saw it. And it's just like some people, remember some people in the New Testament? They weren't even followers of Jesus. They weren't Christians at all. And they started casting out demons. They were they were trying to manifest power, and they didn't have the backing, right? So even the disciples didn't fully understand it, but they went out. And this is what Jesus said to them. This is the way it is. And I think it's where we're at today. He says, I send you out like sheep among wolves. All that we're doing here, this is the reality of outside our doors now, more than ever. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Now, some of you take your version. Now, I want to hear your version, the Bible version of that verse. Therefore, be as blah, blah, blah. Somebody read theirs out loud, a different version. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Any other translation that has any other wordage? Just curious. No? That's an illustration. This is a very simple passage for us, but it is very pointed to what we do as pastors and leaders in a community outside the doors of the church, isn't it? There's some instruction for us. And the reason I want to just kind of close with this passage, I think this passage gives us an aim in our person of how we are to be as we traverse the people around us. Willard says, what is the wisdom of the snake? The wisdom of the snake, as he writes it, is to be watchful and be watchful and observant until the time is right to act. The issue of the snake and the serpent is its timeliness. How does that speak to you? Look at, if God is on the move, if his grace is fresh every day, and grace is pursuing all people with his goodness and his grace, then our posture is not to move quickly, but to understand the right time, the right spaces that God brings our way. There's something that's really freeing in this, that I don't have to wake up and push. Be natural, be who you are. One rarely sees a snake chasing its prey or thrashing about in an effort to impress it. But when it acts quickly and decisively. And as for the dove, it does not contrive. It is incapable of intrigue. They are guileless, totally beyond guile. When you think of that, we're not out to harm. A dove is a not harmful creature. That's not our nature either. Something really good in this. The importance, it has a sense of harmlessness. The important scriptural teaching places on guilelessness is very great. One of the traits of the small child, greatest in the kingdom, is its inability to mislead. Isn't that an interesting statement? An inability to mislead. There's a humility, humbleness. And I want to say, we've got a tough job in this job as a pastor. But you need to know his grace is sufficient every day. Plead and lean on his grace. His action is for us every day. We can count on it. Partner with him. Practice disciplines that are disciplines that match your personal pains and needs. We don't just try series of disciplines. You make practices. For instance, a patient person, an impatient person. Let's say impatience is your problem. You don't just try all the disciplines to solve that. There really are disciplines that are more focused for people with impatience. Maybe silence. Silence might be a good thing to enter into. Practice some silence. You might get perspective. Maybe it's service. Service might be your discipline of practice. So this is a whole area that people are stuck in their passive modes because they don't have an imagination how they're going to get their character changed. One thing they are sure is they've prayed the prayer and they're going to heaven when they die. But wouldn't it be better to become a good person before you die? Isn't that a more preferable place to be? Full of life, joy, peace, hope. It can happen in this life by the grace of God. Hey, thanks for having me here these days. It has been a joy to be with Nexus. And I pray that God does major big things through you, with you, and among your people. So, hey, thanks everybody.